Let's go!
All right, chat. We're gonna get our feed switched over. So yeah, we have it set up over here. And big shout out to WB, to Mortal Kombat, and to Digital Eclipse Atari. You guys are out here. Please introduce yourself. I know who you are, but if you can tell everybody.
Sure. My name is Stephen Frost. I am the head of production at Digital Eclipse, which, as I've said numerous times, is sort of a fancier way of just stating that I have my fingers in pretty much everything that we do.
That goes down at DA.
And just trying to make sure that our studio generates just great products that fans love and enjoy.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. And yeah, we're pretty familiar, you know, from like the fighting game space and all the other stuff that's come out. We played a lot of those on stream. Quick introductions over here.
Steven Johnson, Subtle, used to run NorCal Strong Style.
We have three Steves.
Yeah,
Once
no,
our
I'm
show's
making
up,
it
we have
separate
three
for
Steves.
That's a problem. Oh, there we go. And here's the third Steve.
These three.
Another Steve.
You can never have too many Steves.
Producer on the project.
You go over here.
And you guys are all up in NorCal, right?
Yes, based out of Emeryville, California.
Just a little bit of ways from Pixar. There isn't much in Emeryville. There's Pixar and then there's us.
That's how I know.
Very close. You know, there's Pixar and then there's us.
That's how I know the name. And last but not least.
Ethan Stearns, I'm the head of publishing over at Atari.
Nice, cool. So it's like the entire collection itself, which is something that has been a frothing demand from fans like me, and I think MK fans for a long time, to see these games come back in some way. And quite literally, the first time back in forever, which is what we're going to be directly looking at, MK Trilogy. So I have questions before we get started. Spooky, they can see the thing running on here, right? Okay. So yeah, chat. What you're looking at is the build of MK Trilogy, which is what is exclusively kind of like playable at EVO this year.
That's correct. Yep.
So everyone on the show floor has been checking and trying it out. And most of the games that are on here, we got to talk about what's on here. It's pretty much MK1, MK2, MK3, UMK3, and MK Trilogy, and a lot of variations in between, right?
Right, and MK4.
MK4, sorry.
And yes, as many of the home versions as we could try to pack in here, and then also even a few of the obscure platforms like 32X and Game Gear, which is obviously the platforms that most people didn't necessarily grow up playing, but we want to try to include as many as we can, because depending on where you were and where you grew up, you may have that nostalgic attachment to one version or the other. And it's funny because some people say, like, why are you including the Game Boy version of Mortal Kombat?
It's cool.
And it's like, for a lot of people personally that I know, the Game Boy version of Mortal Kombat, that's what they grew up playing. That's all they had. Exactly. So that's what they have the connection to.
Exactly. And that's like kind of the fascinating thing, is that like the little games in between on like Game Gear and all this kind of stuff that you might not have been aware of, all are a part of a legacy. They're all a part of like a collection. That the whole point is to keep this stuff playable, because not everyone's going to have Game Gears or even like Game Gear emulation officially supported on Nintendo hardware or otherwise. Like that stuff is kind of hard to come across, and now we actually have it. So I got questions about Trilogy.
Here we go.
There's a lot of different versions of MK Trilogy, which I'm sure you guys have gone through like development and heard about, like between all the different variations. Where did you end up like landing and focusing on?
So we always try to find a balance of obviously the ideal version of a game that fans would want, also the version that the most people have played, right? Because that will appeal to the broader demographic. And then from a development perspective, is there a platform, especially if it's new, that we can develop within the confines of the project scope and things like that. So on this, after evaluating it, PlayStation 1 made sense. This is the first time that, as a studio, we've worked to try to release a PlayStation 1 emulation
which doesn't happen like that often in this space, like where you get collections of games that are PS1 games. Like,
that's right.
Even in other fighting game space, there's a reason they stop at the 2D games.
Yes, it's very difficult.
It becomes much more complicated once you get to 3D titles.
Exactly. So we use the PlayStation 1 as a base, and obviously, being fans of MK and listening to the community and working with the community, we're certainly aware of some of the issues that were prevalent in the
Shang Tsung related issues,
Exactly. So we investigated that, we looked into that, and we're like, okay, if we're starting as the PlayStation 1 version as a base, how do we make adjustments to this to make it hopefully the de facto ultimate version that people will play? And so the first thing, obviously right off the bat, is the load times. I know your audience has already commented and seen some of the load time stuff in here, but we've pretty much eliminated the load time. It's almost instantaneous. That carries across the whole product, including the broadest thing, which is Shang Tsung's morphs. For those who didn't play it, there was a couple of settings in the options where you could limit the morphs that Shang Tsung could do to try to
to
keep
make
it in
the game
memory
more
so it's
functional.
fast. Exactly. Or you could enable all, but there's like a 6-second load almost, right, between each morph. So
The Saturn version and PlayStation version were special.
exactly. They're exclusive features of that. But we knew that that's just very disruptive to gameplay. It's annoying, and in today's modern development environment and modern hardware, there's no reason we need that. We're not accessing a disk anymore.
Yeah.
So we eliminated that. So Shang Tsung's morphs now are instantaneous, and they actually act like you would imagine they would be from back then. And that carries, of course, across the whole game. So even when you're loading into the game, such as you go from the towers into the gameplay itself, that load, you only see the loading text for like a split second.
Pretty much.
And then you go in there. So yeah, you can see that here. That's the biggest sort of improvement. But then we started investing a few other things, like what are the other issues that are maybe minor, but we can try to address. One of them is, and this is something that most people probably wouldn't remember or notice, is that on the character select screen, it's very sluggish in the original game across all the versions of Saturn. And it's mainly because it's loading the sprites and the animations.
As they're popping
Right,
in.
and so it's like you'll skip and you'll miss characters. So there's no reason for that either. So now we've sped up that sequence and it's much smoother. Ironically, the way this game is put together, even the way that the 3 screens, which is the main menu, the 2v2, and then I think it's the 8 character or 9
the
character
full
one,
squad.
the speed and the way that it loads is different between all 3 of them. So we fixed one and it was like too fast for the other ones. And so we had to balance it out a little bit and fix that. So now the character select reacts and performs like you would imagine it should.
This is the stuff that like people don't realize when you're bringing back an old game, and it's not just about the raw gameplay itself. Like games in a fighting game space, we think of it from an FGC perspective. The combat is the most important thing, but there's a package here. There's like features and all this other stuff and functionality that people have an expectation with these games to work that way. So I'm anxious to see it. I'm actually going to switch spots with Steve, so you can like get in here. And these guys know this way more, so I'm going to have you guys take controllers, and I'm just going to grill everybody about the project and the game. So
The other big thing, just to call out before I forget too, is, and the really hardcore folks will remember this, but there is for the PlayStation version, there is a bug with the aggressor mode.
Yes, I remember hearing that.
It was a case where, for those who don't know, even if you turned off aggressor mode and tried to have the damage normal, there was a weird instance where for one player, aggressor would in the background turn on.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so the funny aspect of this is even after research, we don't necessarily know what causes that issue.
Oh no, it's still a
something
mystery.
Weird, but we put in like 6 or 7 gates as far as protection in order to try to prevent that from happening. So yeah.
There's funny stuff like that in games all over the 90s where like player 2 combos are just different. like they just act completely different. It carried like even I think MK9 was one of the games that even had that kind of stuff, but mysterious functionality across the board of just like we don't know exactly why this works the way it does, but like that's cool. That's cool that you guys are aware of that, and you know, obviously it's going to be a component of this. We can talk about, because we're watching MK Trilogy. From the Atari front and how you guys were approaching this game from like the publishing side, how is that relationship to like get all of these games intact? Because Atari obviously as like a publisher, we've seen a few things over the past few years. The Atari Collection was cool. There was a lot of games included. The decision-making process, how was that working with Digital Eclipse and like WB to make all this stuff kind of happen?
Yeah, I mean, you know, working with Digital Eclipse has been awesome. I mean, when I joined, they had already started working on Atari 50, and it was very clear from the beginning for me that in so many ways, Digital Eclipse is kind of represents the essence of what this era of Atari wants to do and be, like bring back games, make them accessible.
Modern retro sort of stuff, yeah.
And you know, be kind of innovative in that way, and I think that's something that Digital Eclipse does. I think the other kind of interesting superpower that I've seen from our CEO recently has been the ability to kind of unblock some of the like licensing nightmares or like partner nightmares.
That has been one of the things that fans and people like me have been theorizing, like why has it taken like 15 years to get these back in a collection, and what's been the hurdle in between?
And a lot of it is just kind of pounding the pavement, to be honest. And like there will be other stuff coming in the future where there are collections that and things that Atari published even in the past that we kind of own the publishing rights. We do own the publishing rights to.
Sure.
But like, it's complicated.
Yeah.
And so I think when we had a really awesome meeting where we all came up to Digital Eclipse and we were talking about the future of what games you guys wanted to do, and this is something that we really wanted to do. And I think that our CEO Wade is very focused on like clearing the path to make the best stuff we can make, and whatever he has to do to bring that to the table.
Because that aspect of a lot of the modern, I would say the last like few years of Digital Eclipse collections and titles is like these games that have like a legacy and history, and like bringing that history as a feature to the game. You know, instead of just the legacy is the games that are playable, have fun.
Yeah.
You know, no, it's more like, hey, here's all like the documentation, here's how things happened, here's the literal process that went into the 90s that made all the developers come to the conclusions they did. That was something in previous even fighting game collections I really appreciated, and it's like, now it's actually one of the parts of the game I get to just sit and with the chat and just watch like Ed come up with ideas and see footage of them and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, it's an important thing, and I think what's very unique about our studio at this point is there's a lot of people from the video game editorial background.
Yeah.
I came from that. I wrote for magazines.
Which magazine? Because I probably
So I started with Ultra Game Players magazine, and I started working for PSN, which is a PlayStation magazine in the
Okay.
US. And it's the same company that did Next Gen magazine, and official Xbox magazine,
Yes.
official Dreamcast magazine,
Yeah.
all those. that
all
whole
the
group,
official
right?
Dreamcast magazine,
Yes,
brother.
right. Great magazine. So we all originally, a lot of us met there and then did our separate paths into
Yes.
game development and came back to this. So Mike, who's our studio head, I met him there. Our director, our biz dev guy, Tom, I met him there. Chris Kohler and Dan Emmerich, who are our editorial team leaders, they were in the editorial side of things. So I think the benefit of that and what separates us from other studios is that we approach these collections from what is the story to tell here. And we use the pieces such as the development, artifacts and all the assets we find in the games in order to try to piece together a compelling story that even if you are just a casual fan, hopefully will find it interesting. And the thing that really warms my heart is, and I'll go back to Atari 50, is that yes, we hope to win over Atari fans and people who grew up with Atari, but the things that really resonate are the folks who email us or contact us and say, hey, I didn't grow up playing a 2600 or 7800, I was not around at that time, but your presentation and your engaging story led me to buy this product, and now I am an Atari fan. So that grows the market. So similarly with things like Mortal Kombat or Tetris and things like that, we want to, yes, appeal to the hardcore FGC and those players, but also that whole massive group of people who casually played Mortal Kombat in the early
That's
era.
why Trilogy's special.
Yes, and stepped away, right? And we're maybe overwhelmed by the sheer number of secrets and mystique of the products, but now can get a peek behind the curtain and learn everything there is about it. And it's an interesting story. It's about 4 guys in their 20s wanting to make a cool, game based off of their action heroes,
these kids,
right?
literally,
Exactly. And so it's an interesting story, and it's a friendship. A lot of our stories are about these bonds and friendships that develop during these times. And it's just interesting thing to go through, and then being able to also have that interactive component of being able to load up a game after you have read about it is a compelling piece, right?
And that story is already kind of being told with this collection, because it's kind of like the first time in a really official capacity that like Boone Tobias is kind of back, and their relationship, which was like maybe a bit complicated back in the 20-something years ago, but now it's a point where like we're looking back at the stuff that they put together and you guys are sort of telling that story now.
It is amazing, and I will tell you honestly, when we went to NetherRealm to film interviews, and I was talking to Ed, and then Tobias walked into the studio, and it was like this surreal moment for me, as you can imagine, the two, and they still stay in contact, they're good friends, but for me personally, as a fan growing up playing Mortal Kombat, to see them come together, and then Vogel and Gordon and those guys all come together to reminisce about it, and it came at a perfect time because, as everyone's aware, Mortal Kombat 1 was, sunsetting a bit and waning out, and it became a perfect opportunity for this team to pause and reflect back on the history of this product.
Yeah, I feel like the timing of all of this was like very aptly put, because like MK1 was in a little bit of its sunsetting.
Right.
And like you said, it's like, man, what could you use right now? We could really use the collection. Like I remember specifically saying this on like a podcast where it's like, this is one of those games that deserves it, needs it, and we have to get it. The one thing I was going to talk to about, emulation-wise, you're doing MK4. So this is like one of the first like big like 3D, almost PS1-ish era. Because this is a PS1 game, I get you, but it's like it's a 2D game, right? And there's a lot more complications that come with a 3D game. You get to the Dreamcast and it's exponentially more complicated. So even doing the MK4 version that you guys are doing, even though we're not showing it, that's sort of based on the arcade version, right?
It is the arcade version fundamentally. So the issue with that is it is very, as I've said before, very obtuse hardware. There's very little documentation about it. No one has really successfully been able to emulate it properly yet. And so it's a lot of trial and error. And there's a lot of things that we have to deal with that people don't think about where, you know, it was 3DFX based hardware back in the day. The way that it handled textures and how it displayed things was very specific. And nowadays, you know, we have different platforms, and the way that they display even sprites, textures, filters is very different individually from each other. So it's this fine balance of trying to replicate as close as we can, not just broadly, but on each platform, what the original game kind of played and looked like. So, and you know, like I said, the Switch 2 display things differently, the PlayStation 4 displays things differently. So it's this fine juggling match of like, okay, how close can we get to the actual representation of what the original was? And we have some great folks working on this at our office, and it has been one of the largest tasks for sure in relation to this product.
Well, I'd imagine, because it's like you have to just get tons of people that knew the previous games. How does the game feel? Does anything feel weird? Does anything feel off? Because obviously when you're working in an emulation space, it's getting as close as possible to that like original feel.
We had to buy a board, right? And we had to so it's like just a challenge of like, okay, who has a board that we can buy and get out?
I was about to say, because like realistically the trouble here isn't necessarily like emulating MK4. There's emulators out there, but they aren't doing it right. And so it's like being able to dig into what the hardware was, but then NetherRealm was really gracious, gave us source code to actually help us diagnose all of it.
Oh, wow.
That's crazy that that one American company outside of all the Japanese companies, which just got rid of source code from almost everything in the 90s, actually still has that.
And like that's how we're able to place this together. Like this is really the unique part about like what our product is that nobody really has been able to put those things together. Like being able to take the hardware and then actually know what that hardware is doing. Everybody's been doing interpretations, and that's kind of why you get some of the janky MAME setups where it's like every character looks like Swiss cheese or plays just a little bit off. We know what it's supposed to do.
Some sprites are just the wrong size every once in a while, things like that. Then finding the solutions for that.
NRS has been like a really great partner in giving us what
Mike Boone, shout out to Mike Boone, which is
Mike Boone.
That's Ed's brother, right?
Yeah, he's phenomenal. I sat with him a lot and got to know him, and it's funny because when we go to people who aren't necessarily familiar with us and we try to explain what we do, they don't inherently get what it is, and they're like, they think most things that they have are useless or not important. And so I sat down with him and I was explaining and talking about the making of Karateka with him, and it really sparked a light bulb because Karateka was one of the games that got him interested into the game side of things in general, and actually caused him to come into this industry from where he was. And then once that kind of lit up and he's like, oh my God, and he understood what we were doing. Then he's like, oh my gosh, I have this, and this. And we would be in a meeting, he'd come into the room, he's like, hey, I have this source code from blah, blah, blah. And it like opens the doors, right?
Grail.
And so he has been amazing in being able to give us the source code for a lot of these games and being able to not only go through and help us in relation to games like MK4, but also even like looking at like sprites and things that were not necessarily used in the games.
Oh, sure, things that they wanted to do, maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff like documentation-wise would not really be, you know, very much found on the internet. You're not going to find pictures and stories. It's going to be unique to this collection. And that's also like the interesting story that you guys are like probably discovering is that the MK games going all the way back to the old Midway days and all the ports therein, like these guys pretty much remain like sort of as a dev family. Like they are almost the same people. The scale, scope, and size of things changed over time. But it is like the same group of a bunch of 20-year-old dudes 30 years later that are now like kind of doing the same thing just on a much bigger scale. So I'm very curious to see that side of the collection, to pretty much see how everyone grows.
Yeah, it is amazing. It is amazing. And, you know, I said this before, but we interviewed, I think, 24 different people for this, and right now it's just shy of 3 hours of interview footage that we've edited together. So it's definitely the most that we've ever put into a collection for sure.
So I'll ask that question. I was one thing on a previous Atari collection. of the old Atari games where we were highlighting like Jaguar stuff.
Right.
And it was like an immediate nostalgic moment of an old Jaguar ad. Where like graphics so good it'll make you blow chunks.
Oh, right.
I was like, what is this?
Yes.
Made us all like audibly laugh out loud. That was like something special to me that I forgot about. Was there something that, without spoiling things too crazy, that is like in this collection that is sort of like in there or being revealed? Is there something that kind of made you guys go, whoa, we have that, or that is there, and you know, it's finally a thing?
I think it's, for me, well, there's two parts. One is just the nostalgic hit that I got of going through and looking at the old arcade flyer and advertisements and the Mortal Monday stuff, right? Which was
People don't know what that is, and I'm like, yeah, we had Mortal Monday. Because it's just a legacy of it, yeah.
It is, but I think for me primarily it was some of the stuff that I hadn't seen before, such as John Tobias giving us these sketches and stuff and these notebooks that he had, that he was writing down ideas. And it's just getting a peek into sort of the thought process and how things came together, even in relation to Mortal Kombat 1, right? And it's just very interesting because broadly people understand the story, but on the nitty-gritty day-to-day component, it was interesting to see how little pieces kind of came together to form, you know, the thought of, like, you know, of what this product is and the whole process of what a fatality came from. And like that. So it was cool.
By the way, the one-time Kintaro is actually playable.
Oh, right.
Is that unique to Trilogy, right?
Yes, very unique.
Like he's got a variation of Goro in MKX, but it was never Kintaro, so that's kind of the unique thing here, Chad.
Or jump punches.
The bosses in this game are kind of insane.
Hilarious.
Yeah, they're OP, but like,
So, talking about like fighting game side and stuff like that, and netcode solutions. Obviously, like you guys are using a rollback netcode solution for the game in some way. How has that been? Have you guys been like focusing on online with input delay? Is there what is the big focus when using rollback with the game?
Yeah, we're basically rolling a typical GGPO solution. So this should be pretty standard. If you're playing this on 5K, we're trying to do something similar, but we're taking on a lot more elements. We're trying to do this kind of broadly across a bunch of different games as opposed to individual setups, which offers some opportunities and also some sacrifices in some places, but we're making it feel really good kind of throughout. And really it's trying to, like, these games that have never really been playable before, exactly. That's where we're really working towards
in an official capacity in this way. So which titles specifically actually support like the rollback solution?
we're going to try to include, and we're still finalizing it, but we're going to try to include as many, obviously arcade games, but as many of the arcade games and console games as possible. The handheld games we aren't doing, just because fundamentally we got a bit of experience doing link cable work in Yu-Gi-Oh, which was the last.
People people start talking about like, why don't they just bring PSP games out? I'm like, dude, those games versus mode was ad hoc. Like,
it's very difficult. The sort of the requirements for a link cable is very low latency and little pieces of data very often. And if it doesn't come consistently, the game freaks out and doesn't know what to do, right? And that's fine in a wired cable situation, but in an internet situation, there's just so much room.
It's not designed for anything but that.
It's not designed for that. So it's very, very problematic. So for broadly from an online perspective, we investigated, but sorry folks, no handheld online, but we are gonna try to add online to as many of the console and arcade games as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I'm thinking like, if we're talking about like the console versions, obviously like MK1, MK2, MK3, and UMK3? Yep. Is that the goal right now? Okay. I thought
everything.
I was thinking to skip
everything.
MK3 because it's kind of like the weird.
No, I mean,
yeah, it's people grew up with these things, and really, and again, Steve can speak to the FGC, and I understand there's hardcore fighting game fans who want to be able to play these games online, but from where I come from, it's more of a nostalgic play as far as a lot of people grew up playing these games in the living rooms with their family members or brothers or friends.
Sure.
And there is this really emotional attachment to that. I was really heartwarmed by this woman who I talked to, interviewed some time ago, where fond memories of playing Mortal Kombat with her brother, and her brother passed away. So when we announced this and she was talking to me, she just broke down into tears basically because there's such an emotional attachment to that. And now, being able to add online to this, even if you're separated by distance or states, being able to rekindle and relive that nostalgic moment was important to me, and that's part of the reason why we wanted to do this.
Yeah, it's a good point because it's the same thing for these old collections. Why, you know, for even a variety of other publishers and games, why we advocate for this to exist. The whole point isn't that we have access to them. Like we've been playing them. Like we've been going back to them. The point is that we want other people to sort of experience the things that we did back in the day, much less now, and to be able to have that because those resources just aren't available to everyone. Like people are just gonna have Dreamcasts and PlayStations hooked up nowadays, you know.
Yeah.
So
I would say
that's great.
We did some player testing, and like it was pretty amazing just to play like the SNES version of MK1 online. It just feels like that was supposed to exist already. Like it just worked and everything felt great.
X-Band or Game Band.
I think it's also like a big part of like there's a lot of these games that just people haven't had the experience, and we don't know. We're not trying to play judge about what game is competitive or what like people are going to be into.
Oh yeah.
I started playing Mortal Kombat 2 on Game Boy, and I am like amazed at how great this game actually is for its time. It feels like a really authentic Mortal Kombat game on the Game Boy, and it's just like these hidden jewels just aren't being seen by anybody. We can put Mortal Kombat 3 out, and who knows, maybe we find something that really makes Mortal Kombat a really strong competitive game, and we don't want to be like in the way of that.
That's the fascinating thing is that some of these games had such a small lifespan back when they first existed, like the vanilla versions of some games. MK3 is like the most definitive one because of the lack of Scorpion and the negative press that got back in the day.
Exactly.
But they alleviated that within like less than 6 months. And next thing you know, UMK3 was just the dominant game. What was even MK3 at all?
Right.
And it's like, but that's interesting. Like it's not that we're just looking for the things that are, like you said, competitive standards.
Yeah.
It's the fact that the game's probably relatively undiscovered in what you can really do in it.
And I think that speaks again to the context component, right? Of like how Digital Eclipse presents these collections often. Gives context to all that stuff.
Yes.
So it helps tell that story. You might not know that or remember that and be able to go back and realize that was the narrative at the time.
Yeah. And Trilogy is an interesting one, and you mentioned like the casual audience, and yeah, UMK3 is effectively where the old school Mortal Kombat competitive community like resounded.
Yeah,
the PS2 era was pretty unique, but it's also like people kind of went back to that one, and that game is where they found like their community.
Go back.
Trilogy is different because there was no arcade scene, right? This one was specifically like kind of like a jumbled together bunch of assets. This is
It's a party game. Like I call it a party game.
This is the Marvel vs. Capcom 2
Yes.
of this collection.
Right.
So that's the game where the majority of casual fans, when they say what's the best old MK,
my God.
they don't say 2, they don't say UMK3, which are where the competitive community goes. They all say Trilogy because it had the most stuff. It just had the most things.
I mean, you're looking at Kano. He
Yeah.
had
And the MK1 sprite.
MK1 sprite. He never had a run. So how
He's
does he run?
he's
He
really
walks
quickly
3
walking.
times.
Fast.
It is. It is very.
Power walks.
It is very. It's very funny, and I think also part of our juggling, and you were talking about the casual audience. Part of our work that goes into appealing to that is there is this whole thing where, and I talked about this earlier, where casual fans liked and enjoyed Mortal Kombat, but oftentimes after a while, it may be just they left because there was too many secrets or things to worry about or codes to remember,
That's a good point.
things like that. And so we spent a lot of time in this collection. And I call it like no more secrets, right?
Yeah.
It's the peek behind the curtain, so that every major menu, secret, hidden character, everything is accessible, and you can go in. I don't want people to have to look up on the internet, how do I fight against Reptile in Mortal Kombat 1?
How does that even work?
Right?
How do I unlock human smoke?
Exactly. So you can go in and you can learn how to do it and do it yourself, obviously the original way, or you can go into the options for Mortal Kombat 1, flip a switch, and then immediately jump in and fight Reptile. And so we do that for everything, so that by the time you get done, hopefully with this collection and playing every game, you really fundamentally feel confident that you've seen everything that these games have.
Full breadth of the roster, full
Exactly.
breadth of like the secrets.
He told me that at Summer Game Fest, and like that was awesome because like, yeah, a lot of those are tough, and I'm pretty sure you'll have like the Noob Saibot one, and that
That's
one's
the
like,
crazy
one.
that
That's
one's like 250 games continuously, and then you get to fight Noob Saibot and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So,
you have to
like,
do some crazy
having that-
stuff.
Like for me, I'm an MK2 like super master, and like
Right.
I still have trouble fighting Smoke.
Right.
It's hard to get him to do Toasty at the right time, or even Reptile. That was incredibly difficult because the AI was,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
reading your inputs like crazy. So trying to get double flawless on that was tough. So I could just go start, fight Reptile, and you go in the bottom.
Yeah, and that's what some people, their personality traits are like, yeah, I will accomplish that.
Yeah.
Others are like, right?
In my opinion, once you hit that 10 to 15 year mark of like, a game that has this many secrets, it's like, bro, okay, so let's give us access to it now.
Exactly.
It's one of those things of the old era of like Williams and Midway, where so many of those arcade experience, those console games, everything was just jam-packed full of codes or secrets or hidden characters or anything like that.
Mortal Kombat started it. Like
it really did.
With a reptile on the bottom of the pit, and like only certain people saw it. It was cool to be able to go to the arcade and have somebody tell you like, oh, did you know that this character's on the bottom?
Make up a story about it.
Like,
Yeah.
this is how
That's how I made a lot of my friends in high school. We just talked about all the secrets
stuff like,
of
yeah,
the game.
yeah.
Like, yeah, my friend, there's a fatality where you can turn him into a duck.
Yeah. Like,
Literally
So
happened.
actually, it's the interesting part for the documentary for me is that we started talking to Ed and John, and they were like, they knew all this stuff was going on. People were like saying, oh, if you do this with this character, Sub-Zero turns into a bear or something like that.
Yeah, so crazy.
And they heard about it, and they're like, well, I made the game.
Yeah, and then they made something like
Then let me go ahead in Mortal Kombat 3, let me make Sub-Zero turn into a polar bear and eat you as part of it, just as like a goof. And that's the thing that I think is really interesting about our documentary is that all the things, the rumors that you've heard, they have heard all of them.
Right.
And they were playing off of this to like,
I like,
in every single way.
But wasn't that the point to like get people into thinking that there's stuff?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah, that was the point, right?
That to me is like the original story of MK. MK is a game that's known for its long-running story, but this game kind of began its story because of the stories that people were telling each other in arcades. Of like, it was creating a lore, like based on the fact that there was these weird things and secrets in there that eventually became what the modern MK series sort of becomes. And now, like, we actually get to see all that lore in a collection like this.
But I think you guys did a great job of bringing that back with Pink. Was it Pink?
Well, Ed, yeah, he wanted to bring the secret back. So
Yeah.
Ed-
So and
Ed
that was a
loved Floyd.
secret.
It
Yeah,
was a nod
Floyd.
to the old stuff.
Yeah, and it was great because people discovered it. I mean, the internet makes things very different now. Somebody finds out and everybody knows about it. Like not that long ago, but like the secrets are still there, and people were like, "Wait, what? How did you figure this out?" And then people still had that conversations. It brought it back to that element of the surprise of figuring out what do I have to do to get this. And to be honest, the world of trying to figure out what you have to do in order to get to Floyd was still there. Like we had discussions on stream of figuring out, okay, you have to go through these steps and understand. And some people were just making stuff up, and you're like, okay, well.
It's crazy. I remember, Max, when you were trying to do Pink Floyd and going through that whole thing.
Yeah, it took like 3 hours. Yep.
It's crazy. It was funny when I was talking with Ed off camera, and because he generally likes to listen to particular music while he's developing the stuff, and obviously he has music where he's coming out, and we were just discussing that he's running out of combinations, of colors and everything, right?
What the heck?
Stuff,
Yeah.
which is true. He's running out of ninja colors.
Yeah.
Quite actually, but it's been great to talk with those guys. Just from a fanboy perspective, being able to chat with them and learn their thought process from development, because as a studio at Digital Eclipse, we believe that there's so much that can be learned from these early eras of games. They informed the development of the industry that we have today. They informed the development of the genres and stuff that we have today. So being able to see how things were created and why they were created actually it helps us to become better game developers ourselves, right?
Yep. How and I have to ask this from you guys that have done several collections for several games now, and sort of get the hang of it. Modern Digital Eclipse is like really impressive in terms of keeping this legacy alive for these published titles. How often do you guys get source code?
Yeah, far fewer times than you would think.
This is probably a pretty unique one, right?
It is. They're generally a lot of cases, and especially how old. It depended on how old it is, right? To be fair, the source code for this had to be searched for as well, right?
It's not like you have it, you can just start developing like, well, how does this thing even work?
Exactly. So more often than not, that's not the case, and we have to figure out ways to do our hacks and modifications outside of that, which is a lot more time intensive, but is important, right? But the good thing that happened, I was commenting on this yesterday, is now that we've started to establish ourselves as a studio and hopefully our preservation efforts and our restoration efforts, a lot of people are starting to think more fundamentally, especially the people we worked with or have worked with, about how do we save the stuff, how do we do it. And what's amazing to me is now I have conversations with companies that we may not have worked with yet, but are like, you know what, at some point we expect to work with you, so we're gonna start saving this stuff now. And that's
smart.
a wonderful sort of situation to be in. So 2-3 years from now, when we start to talk and engage about something, like, look, we've already started gathering the stuff and collating the stuff for you. And I think from an industry perspective, that's a great place to be, a much better place to be.
And for like perspective for the chat that might not be aware of that, that's not just like raw game data. It's also the stuff that went into the creative process that led to an eventual alpha or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's where the interesting stories really are.
So, question: when they gave you the source code, like, did you guys like have free reins, or like, hey, if you find something, could you still keep that like under wraps? Because I know there's going to be like certain maybe like sprites or like maybe a fatality that was like they were kind of working on and they didn't.
No, we're including we went through. So we got access source code and we went through and we started piecing together all of the sprites in the games. And there's a variety of things that were obviously not used in the original, but were used in Trilogy later on. But there are still other, like, you know, Goro's spin and things like that, right?
Baraka's spin spin. Baraka had a spin in 2 for a while, and it disappeared.
So there's elements there that carried forth to Trilogy that they used, but there's still other stuff which are talked about in the videos, but never showed up fundamentally. And so we're piecing those together and are going to be showing those and talking about that stuff that kind of got cut. Generally due to memory constraints, quite honestly, because of those early arcade games, but still very interesting to see. I saw, I won't spoil it here, but I saw a animated image of a sequence that one of our artists put together that I hadn't seen before, that is really cool.
Really?
And that is talked about in one of the videos, in the fatality video, and now you actually get to see what it's supposed to look like because it was never included. Stuff like that is great.
Man.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that's cool.
Really cool.
Deleted scenes.
Even I'm like, who actually made Trilogy? Because a lot of these games and like ports and stuff like that, they were too busy working on like new Mortal Kombat. So even like learning that history is going to be something that is like fascinating to me, because Trilogy probably has one of the most like curious stories that probably hasn't been told, you know, in this whole collection.
It is true. It's true. It's like the equivalent, like it's like when I tell the story of Street Fighter the movie, right?
Oh yeah,
that sort of stuff, right?
Close to being a Mortal Kombat game.
Yeah, exactly. But it is these interesting stories and this engagement. I think, and I said this early in this meeting too, but I think the initial entry point for us is getting people to understand what we're trying to do first. And more people are aware of that. But obviously, not everyone in NetherRealm understood, like, are you making a documentary? Are you doing, like, are there interactive components? And then once you see them recognize and understand, and we can show examples like we show them Atari 50 or Tetris Forever or something like, they're like, oh, I get this. And then they start like, I have this.
I have this. Time to go to the garage.
Right? Nothing is not important, right?
Yeah, I think that's going to be easily one of the most fascinating parts. You guys recently announced a like a physical version of. Did I see a physical PC version? Did that?
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah, you don't see that often, but yes, we're partnering with you and I and Limited Run. Limited Run is doing the collector's edition, which, as you mentioned, has a PC version as well.
I want to see that box, because I think Trilogy did come in an old PC box. I think it did.
Yeah, it's the biggest thing for that, which I was trying to go for, was the Goro. There's a Goro controller holder.
Yes.
Which I'm always, when I'm evaluating what things to try to include, I'm like, what is something practical that I would use that's not just something that I'll look at and throw away potentially, or what has nostalgic value. And so I really wanted to do some sort of statue or Goro holder. And so I was happy that came to fruition. But mainly those editions are a lot of nostalgia for people. Especially the deluxe edition, which has like those original arcade flyers that everyone remembers in the magazines, and it has the marquees and things like that. And so it is very much like, especially if you grew up during that time, you were hanging out in the arcades. That's that rush of endorphins, right? And you see this stuff. So we really wanted to cater the additions to that. And then we're also doing the slip cases with the different ninjas.
The colors, yep. I saw those.
Oh, I didn't
Like
I missed
reptile.
that one. I
Yeah, it's
need
on
to
the
see that.
Atari.com one, so you can choose. So there's a reptile one, a scorpion. You know,
Oh, that's
stuff,
badass.
And so whatever character you really love, you can order those versions separately, and they come in a slipcase with that.
That's great.
That reminded me, not of Deadly Alliance, but one of the MK ones that had like Melina,
Right.
and then like Katana, and then one had Johnny Cage and Goro, I believe.
Yeah, there was different packaging. Was that?
Chat will let us
It was
know.
Armageddon, right? It was it
Not
Armageddon or was
the
it
one before Deadly
or
Alliance?
Deception?
Deception, yeah.
Deception. I may have been Deception. Yeah, they had different packaging fronts,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, Deception. Yeah.
There's a few questions from the chat in terms of like video filters and stuff like that, which is obviously prevalent in previous like legacy collections that you guys have done. Can we expect stuff like that in this one?
We are continuing. So we've tried to improve our CRT filter quite a bit. You can
There's a lot of development on CRT filters over the past couple years. Yeah.
We
Little
got it to a
grainy.
pretty good place in relation to the Power Rangers game. We were really happy with sort of the CRT. It actually won an award somewhere. I can't remember where it was, but for the CRT, the most accurate CRT filter. But we're actually trying to improve that even more and do things like, can we start to potentially add like the glow on
Nice.
stuff?
The glow of the phosphorus or
Yeah,
something
exactly,
like that.
things like that. So we try to like, again, these are things that are little nerdy things that most people don't really care about or think about, but it brings you back subconsciously. Like you remember when you're doing it, you're like, oh yeah, for some reason this feels very familiar to me.
Yeah.
And so we try to deliver on those sorts of options. So the filters, the bezels, scaling. There's some people who keep paying me like, why are there black bars on the sides? I'm like, you want to stretch it? I don't quite understand. Some people prefer a stretched image, so we'll do that. It kills me inside a little bit.
Kills me inside too.
But you know, you can scale it and stretch it if you want to, and then there'll be bezels that you can turn on and off, and then of course the filters like the CRT.
Yeah. But no, also the thing too is like, because let's see. Fatality demonstration.
Go
It's
for
the
it.
ultimate supreme demonstration.
what the
But the
heck?
thing with the filter, like with the CRT, because like when I go to an arcade and they're using like a HD screen, it doesn't look as good. Like this,
It needs CRT. But Mortal Kombat needs CRT, yeah.
Mortal Kombat especially needs a CRT. Like when you play Mortal Kombat 2
Digitized
or 2,
characters really-
on a
it's
CRT looks phenomenal. And like I'll see it in the arcade and they have like an HD screen. I'm like But like when it has that, it just makes it look so much better.
It is, and we don't have the CRT here because this is a standalone Trilogy build, but when you play it with a CRT filter on, it just looks
Yes.
so much better. Yeah.
There's also one part of this where because we've been looking so in depth in this, is that because CRTs usually end up bulging,
Yeah.
they made the art to fit what the CRT is. So like what's on a circle on a flat screen isn't quite a circle when you put it on a CRT screen. And so when we apply those filters, the game starts feeling a lot more High-Get original.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, CRTs were not flat. Most of them
No.
weren't. You had to wait till like Sony Vegas and things like that eventually that had flat screens.
And I tell you, in a lot of these old sprite games, like, it's tough for them to get it done right. But like, but whenever we go back and, you go to the arcade and you'll see other like old school pixel-based art games, it just, the CRT filter, like CRT
The
screen
CRT itself,
looks
yeah.
just so good.
It makes a big difference.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
And just even the colors and the way that the bands are, it gives the illusion of more colors than were possible on those platforms.
Yeah. Well, I think we're getting the best thing possible, which is the fatality demonstration.
Yeah, right?
I can't wait to eventually play. Every time I've jumped into UMK3 or MK Trilogy, I just like find some wild thing character can do. These games are so fast, but they're like not super complicated. Like they're pretty easy to play, and all the characters only have like 3 or 4 combo strings per character, and that's it. But the speed of the game is like this, so you're always making decisions.
It is, especially those later games. Yeah, the speed jump is dramatic.
Yeah, I can't wait to go home and play it. So talking about that, do we have a tentative release window yet? Has that been announced?
Later this year.
This year? It is not 2026.
No.
Correct. Yeah.
It is this year.
Yeah,
I
and
think
I
we
think probably an
announced the
important
release.
thing to put out that it'll most likely be before the physical release. So there's a date out now for the pre-order for physical.
Gotcha.
It'll probably be before that.
Yeah, and which just so we get everybody at home a heads up.
Yeah.
What's it coming out on, like console-wise?
Oh, everything. So Switch, Switch 2, Xbox One, Xbox Series, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and PC.
Awesome.
Nice.
Awesome.
And the Switch 2 version will be on the cart. So I know that's like
It's a full.
on
It's
the
a full.
card.
I want a physical cartridge.
so that's a big like hot topic these days, and we're into game preservation as well, and so that was an important thing for us.
That's a good call. That's a very good call. All right, well, guys, thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time to bring this down here. And seeing fully functional MK Trilogy with no crazy stuttering or anything like that is kind of like a sight to behold.
Because man, we tried to play it a long time ago, and it takes a long
Bro,
time. In between matches,
I
you
played
have
the
these
PS1
save
version.
state,
I was like,
Close to a minute.
this
close
is
to
rough.
a minute. Yeah. So to have it running this flawless and this quick is
And it wasn't just the
Major
Shang Tsung
job.
thing. It was like we're picking
Yeah.
our characters. We just want to play. Now
yeah,
loading.
rematch. Yeah.
There's a loading screen when you go to the continue screen to
Yeah.
go back to the main menu to go into the character select.
Boy, howdy.
It's
Yeah.
like,
All right. Thank you guys so much. We're
Thank
going
you. It was a
to
pleasure.
keep back up
Appreciate
here.
it.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Spooky.
All right.